Welcome, gentlemen, and some of you ladies too, back to the channel. Today we are doing another free training. This one's a little bit shorter, a little bit sweeter. I've been doing these reels on Instagram with these conversations, right, between a man and a woman, like hypothetical. A lot of people are finding these relatable because they do happen in real life. And on one of these conversations, when the woman thinks that a waitress is flirting with her man and she thinks that he's flirting back with her, there's a little bit of sparks that fly, a little bit of conflict that ensues. In that discussion, there's a lesson to be had about frame and masculine frame. You don't have to subscribe for this. You don't have to sign up for an email newsletter for this. But while you're thinking about it, go ahead and do subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be making more videos like this soon, and you're not going to want to miss out. Also, really helps me spread the message. This video, we're talking about frame, and my men's group and my clients, we go super in depth on it and we learn how to grow it and build it and hold it better. We don't have time for all that today, obviously. This is just kind of an overview of what frame is, and there's going to be a breakdown on that Instagram reel so that you can see exactly what frame was being held and broken and accepted in that reel. So without further ado, you guys already know we're about to see some bad handwriting, and we're going to go to the trusty iPad for the breakdown. Okay, so masculine frame, guys, is this concept of the masculine player in the relationship holding the framework for how interactions in the relationship are supposed to go. Okay, imagine a frame on a picture or the frame for pouring concrete, right? You need to have frame so that the artwork and the concrete or whatever it is can be encapsulated and controlled. Because if they're not, then chaos ensues, right? The feminine loves having a frame because that enables her to thrive and flourish and feel free, yet within boundaries, right? When a kite doesn't have a string, or when the ocean doesn't have the shore, when the fire doesn't have a fire pit, right? Then we run into issues. And masculine frame is simply referring to the masculine's obligation and role to provide frame for the interactions within the relationship. And it usually looks like conversations. That's how a lot of interactions happen between the male and female, are through conversations. And so conversational frame is what we're going to be focusing on in this call. So what we see here immediately is we see a frame being established. Whoever opens the conversation establishes the frame. And it does not mean that we need to reject the frame that someone else establishes every single time. Not at all. But we do need to make sure, as the masculine player, that we are leading the frame, that we are approving of the frame, that we're keeping an eye on the frame, and that it doesn't go to somewhere that we don't want it to go. And that's not best for the relationship. It's not about micromanaging or control. It's about protection and leadership, right? And this is very hot, by the way, when men do this for women. So she opens the frame with that statement. That waitress was checking you out. Were you flirting with her? So she opens the frame as the judge. She is the judge, and she is the jury, and potentially the executioner as well. She accuses or implies an accusation to the man. Were you flirting with her, right? The implication is, I have evidence that there was a flirtatious interaction going on, and so I'm going to ask you what was going on, and based on your answer, I'm going to judge what I believe, right? The reason she's asking him, were you flirting with her, implies that his answer is going to educate her final judgment, her final answer. Do I think he was flirting with her or do I not? When he said no, he is accepting her frame, right? He is accepting that she is the judge, and he's accepting the role of defendant. He's saying, no, Your Honor, I was not flirting with her. So this was not a satisfactory answer. And guys, it's usually not. Whenever a woman comes to you, or whenever someone behaving in the feminine comes to you with some sort of accusatory frame, then a one-word answer is usually not going to cut it. Just letting you know. Okay, so he says no and accepts his role as the defendant in the frame. So then the judge comes back, is not satisfied, surprise, surprise, and says, so why were you so friendly? Now we're accusing, right? You were so friendly. You weren't that nice to me all day. So it's like, well, if you weren't flirting with her, why were you so friendly? Because I didn't get any of that friendliness. So at this point, the judge is not satisfied, and the jury is definitely leaning toward guilty, and the executioner is sharpening the axe, right? Our defendant doubles down on his role as being the defendant because he brings defense, right? He's being defensive. She was smiling and bubbly, and so I was just, that's his justification, right? I was just being the same way. Not a big deal. He's trying to defend himself here, right? And so he's solidifying the frame that she opened with. And then, of course, she takes offense to that. The judge is getting angry now. So am I not smiling and bubbly enough for you? And then he's still in the defensive. Of course you are, babe. And then the judge comes back. So then why don't you flirt with me too? And that's all of the conversation we see. But obviously, it ain't going too hot for either party. There's a few problems here. We could point to the woman and say, oh yeah, she's being insecure. She needs to grow up. Even the best of women are going to be insecure at times. Maybe not about this type of thing, but they will find a reason to be insecure at times because they're not perfect. Newsflash, right? Women are not perfect. Newsflash, men are not perfect. We're going to have issues too. We all have issues. The point of this training is not to point out the insecure woman. The point of the training is to say, hey, guys, when your woman brings something to your attention that is not wanted, like I don't want to talk about this is not fun, such as this conversation, we need to know what to do, right? His first mistake is accepting her frame. So when he said no, that wasn't the end of the world, but he could have done better. He could have chosen not to accept her frame. I had one of my guys, he's actually the fitness coach for my men's group. He left a really good comment. So when she said that waitress was checking you out, were you flirting with her? My fitness coach said, be quiet, look her in the eye, smirk, move to the side of the table, move to her side of the table, and pull her close to you and kiss her. Then stare into her eyes and say something like, one of the many things I love about you is how silly you can be sometimes, right? So his name's Jason. Jason was demonstrating how you could completely refuse the frame. So instead of judge, jury, executioner, and defendant, the guy is responding by completely disregarding that frame, and he is turning it into a moment to show her affection and appreciation and that she's the only woman for him. You don't have to use those exact words that Jason did, not at all. But the point is he is not accepting her frame, and he's doing it in a loving, leadership, flirtatious kind of way. Because what our boy right here didn't do is he didn't recognize something very important about the woman's opening statement. She said, that waitress was checking you out. So there's a little bit of jealousy in there. A little bit of, that's my man. This is my relationship. Are we good? Are we secure? Jason was able to sense that underlying insecurity in the opening statement and address that directly, right? He didn't accept the frame of what she was saying, but he addressed the underlying insecurity and reasons why her opening statement was positioned that way. And he did not accept the frame, he completely flipped it. Our boy in the example, however, doubles down on being the defendant, and he is matching her parameters for the conversation, and it doesn't turn out well. Women do this because they're insecure. Sometimes they do it just out of teasing. There was a TikTok trend a few years ago where the girl would go up to the guy and say, hey, you look like you can't swim. And the ones that went viral, of course, were the ones where the men accepted that frame. What a silly thing to say to someone, right? Hey, you look like you can't swim. That's bizarre. It's completely silly. And the girls were doing it to be silly, right? The insecure men would accept that frame, and they would literally go jump into a pool in the dead of winter to prove that they could swim. Or they would start arguing about how they were the captain of the swim team in high school. Or oh, I bet I could beat you any day. Or any of these kinds of nonsensical things, right? Because they wanted to prove something. They wanted to embrace her frame because they were triggered. So masculine frame is maintaining control of the framework in which the conversations and interactions are held in a given space. When I'm on my men's group calls with my guys, or when I'm on client calls, I can't let the frame of the call on a one-on-one turn into me complaining about my problems. And I can't let it turn into him complaining about his problems, because now we're not coaching, we're not doing anything, we're not being productive. So I have to control that frame as the leader in those interactions, and so do you as the man in your interactions with the feminine. Now you can do this too aggressively, and you can be too micromanagey with it, Of course, that's toxic masculinity, by the way, like being too controlling. That's a thing. Men do that sometimes. But a woman appreciates when those frames are established and set the right way. This is the same thing that happens if there's a tragedy, if there's an emergency, if the lights go off, if something weird and out of the norm happens. The person that everybody's heads turn to in that moment is the person that they are hoping will establish the frame. Because that emergency, that disruption interrupts everybody's frame, and they look to a leader to establish, hey, what's the new frame going to be? When a toddler falls over and bonks his head on the ground, he's totally fine. Those little kids are indestructible. When he bonks his head on the ground and he's surprised and he's stunned, right? He looks around the room at the adults and he looks to see what frame are we going to have this incident in. Are the adults going to panic? Because if they're panicking, I'm panicking, right? So as the leader, you have to establish a healthy frame. All right, we're going to do a couple more examples of what frame looks like here. Next stop, we're going to do a funny one. This is on one of my comment sections. This is on a reel that went semi-viral lately, like 300K, and it might be up to 400K now. But this is a typical blue-haired liberal troll, all right? And this was the comment, which I pinned for kicks and giggles. Your biblical perspective is BS, buddy. Your Bible is all from misogyny, racism, slavery, and genocide. Why don't you approach life from a perspective of trying to maximize people's well-being? Oh, we know why. You'd have to acknowledge women are people and not just a scapegoat for all your problems, right? So that's absolutely ridiculous, right? Just the frame here. I mean, there's so many. There is no frame here. It's just this barrage of stupidity, right? So your biblical perspective is BS, buddy. Okay, so opening statement is kind of the attack. And then misogyny, racism, slavery, and genocide. So like coming in on all these different points, like I can't address all these different points. Like this is a whole debate you're trying to have here, but not really. Because we see they follow up with just these personal insults, right? They're implying that I don't acknowledge that women are people and that I think they're just a scapegoat for all my problems. Like just so much anger and rage, right? Which is an uneducated slander, right? Which is very typical for trolls, right? Whether they're on one side or the other. This is just how trolls talk. What a lot of butthurt triggered people will do is they will accept that frame and they'll start an argument. I did not do that. I completely dismissed the whole comment and refused to acknowledge any of it, and I established a new frame. My frame was a joke. Let's be honest with ourselves, people. It was a joke. This is a lighthearted joke. I mean, it's a little bit of a burn. We'll call it a roast. How's that? It's a lighthearted roast. I said, you have the cat picture and angry slander, but missing the pronouns in your bio. How did you graduate liberal troll school? Standards are low these days. I'm not addressing the argument. I'm not calling her a bad person. I'm just making a joke about her being a troll. I'm not actually saying she needs to put pronouns in her bio. I'm not actually saying that everybody with cats is a liberal troll. Anybody with half a brain knows that, right? I'm just not accepting her frame, but I'm turning it into sort of a roast, right? What's funny is she and everybody in the comments pretty much accepted that frame. So she comes back on and says down here, oh, I'm smarter than you any day. You've swallowed centuries of propaganda down your willing throat, which I didn't respond to. I don't care. So she accepted the frame of roast. And of course, she's anything but lighthearted, just so angry, right? I've done nothing to this person. So angry. But she accepts the roast frame and tries to roast me back because she's smarter than me any day, obviously, right? Because I've swallowed centuries of propaganda down my willing throat. First of all, how dare she assume that my throat was willing? So that's an example of frame not being accepted, and for good reason. All right, well, we'll wrap up with one more example. I've got a call I need to jump on here soon, so I got to stop filming. This is from the man himself. Jesus was actually a master of frame control. He did it all the time. The Pharisees would come to him with questions that they had designed to trap him. And they would come to him with these stupid sayings and stupid questions and accusations all the time. And quite often he would respond to the question with a question. A lot of people that grew up in church know that, oh yeah, Jesus often responded to a question with a question. But what they don't always realize is that's frame control. Jesus is saying, hey, we're not going to go based on the standards that you want us to go on. I'm going to take control of this conversation and put you on the spot instead. But here's a more sort of tender leadership type way that he did that, and the type of way that I would recommend for you guys to do with your women, in the same way that Jason recommended in that initial example with the restaurant. So this is, the classic storm at sea, peace be still, Jesus calm in the storm. But check out what happens. So this is from Mark 4. They are crossing the sea, right? The storm comes up, right? And this is the one where he's asleep while the water is filling the boat. There's water coming to the boat. Jesus is in the stern, the back of the boat. He's asleep on a pillow. The disciples are obviously freaking out, and they woke him up and said, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" Notice how Jesus does not be a nice guy and accept their frame. Christ in the church, so this is literally Christ in the church in the boat here, and we're supposed to love our wives as Christ loves the church. See, a lot of the nice guys that I talk to and work with, if they were in a similar situation to Jesus, imagine if your church or if your woman came to you and said, "Babe, do you not care that XYZ, right? Don't you care that blah, 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 right? Why are you not addressing?" They're basically saying, clearly you don't care. You would address this the way I want you to address it. We've all been in those situations where it's like, don't you care about that? The kind of the nagging. And of course, this wasn't nagging, but Jesus did not accept that frame. He did not say, "Oh, of course I care. I'm so sorry. I know it must have been so hard because I was asleep." He didn't do that. He, the perfect leader, teacher, example of masculinity, did not accept their frame. He handled the problem. Verse 39, he just handled the problem. And then he set a new frame. He said, "Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith?" He completely disregards their opening frame. "Don't you care about us? Why don't you care about us?" He handles the problem, comes back to them and says, "Well, why do you not have faith?" Right? Complete reversal of frame. So to wrap up here, because I got to jump on this call, here are some reasons why you might want to reject someone else's frame. Because a lot of times, guys, you should accept someone's frame. Like if you're talking to, a person who is intelligent and you have normal circumstances and there's no problems with the conversation, then accepting someone else's frame is fine. It's not an alpha move to just reject everybody's frame all the time. That's not what the point is here. But here's some reasons. This is like no particular order, and this is not an all-inclusive list. There's other reasons too. But here's some common reasons that you might want to reject someone's frame. If they are misusing a term and you guys are going to be talking about the same thing in different ways, you probably don't want to accept that frame. If they're coming into it with false assumptions, that's not going to help you, right? Like, you need to correct those false assumptions first, start over from the correct frame. Same issue here, potentially not starting from the same point of reference. If we're disagreeing on how to define terms, if the frame they're coming to you at is immoral, or quite frankly, if you just don't want or need to engage with them, right? If my mom and I are out, she's a very kind Southern woman, and some pitiful looking person is trying to sell something, and I don't mean like a homeless person, I mean just like, one of those puppy dog-eyed salespeople, right? If one of those people is trying to sell something, they open a conversation with, "Hi, ma'am, how are you doing today?" Right? They open that frame seemingly with this innocent care and concern. And my mom, even though she knows that she is going to get sucked into a conversation that she probably doesn't want to have, it is a lot harder for her to not accept that frame and say like, "Oh, I'm good. How are you?" Right? She's going to jump into that conversation because the person opened it with that frame. But frame control in that situation is to realize, hey, we're not starting from the same point of reference here. You're not actually asking me how my day's going. You're opening this conversation up to get me to buy something, right? So recognizing that dissonance and where we're trying to start from is a great reason to reject that frame and just keep walking, right? My mom might say it might be rude to keep walking, whereas I would say it's not rude because we both know that they weren't genuinely asking how your day was, right? So that is an overview of frame. If you want to strengthen your own masculine frame and do a deep dive into what you might be struggling with in frame, how you can get better with your masculine presentation, again, definitely make sure you're subscribed. If you want to book a free call with me to get to better understand what's going on in your situation and potentially get you some solutions, there's a link below. You can book a call with me. We can talk about that. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you soon.